Let's jump right into it. You know, we usually think of modern family law as, well, modern, totally disconnected from medieval history. But in this explainer, we're going to see how the exact same mechanics that old monarchs used to confiscate wealth and neutralize the rivals are actually still functioning right now. They're just wearing a modern legal suit.
Take a look at this visual framework. We've got swans resting safely in a purple circle in the center. That represents true personal financial sovereignty. But right on the left, directly opposing them, is this stack of sharp, aggressive chevrons. Think of those chevrons as the state's slicing shears of asset confiscation, the machinery constantly trying to pierce your safe zone. Keep this image in the back of your mind as we track how the state's reach has evolved.
So to really understand how the state views your property today, we have to rewind the clock and trace the legal evolution of the Crown Estate. Based on the deep historical research by Graham McBain, this story actually kicks off back in the year 1066. When William the Conqueror invaded, he laid down this absolute feudal premise. All land belongs, ultimately, to the king. He essentially merged the public and private estates into one. Skip ahead to 1322, and it becomes recognized that the Crown Estate is inalienable. It belongs to the nation to fund the government. And here's the really wild part. It wasn't until the Crown Private Estate Act of 1800 that sovereigns were finally allowed to own property privately. For centuries, under absolute feudal land sovereignty, true private property just didn't exist outside the Crown's reach.
And this sets the stage for how early monarchs handled breakups within that feudal system. Yvonne Seal's research shows that royal divorce in the Middle Ages was completely weaponized. Medieval monarchs, guys like Philip II of France and Lothair II, they didn't just have marital spats. They used the dissolution of their families as a tool of Machiavellian statecraft. Since true Christian divorce wasn't really a thing, they had to get creative. They'd use these bizarre canonical loopholes from the church, like hyper-complex rules on consanguinity, or claiming a union was never actually consummated just to scorn an annulment. This was absolutely not about romance. It was a calculated playbook to manage political alliances, neutralize noble rivals, and keep a tight grip on massive family estates and succession lines.
But what if a monarch didn't want to wait for a marriage to fall apart to grab that wealth? Well, they used the law as a direct weapon. The Tudor crown, with ministers like Thomas Cromwell steering the ship, famously relied on the Bill of Attainder. This was a legislative act that declared someone guilty of treason without a formal trial. But here is the real kicker. It caused what was legally known as corruption of blood. That literally meant the condemned person's heirs were entirely blocked from inheriting anything. It was a terrifying, highly efficient way to financially slaughter rival families and instantly suck their massive estates right back into the crown.
Now, let's contrast that with today. The historical state used the Executioner's Acts, Bills of Attainder, and that brutal corruption of blood to dismantle families and redistribute wealth. The modern state, it does the exact same thing, just without the acts. Instead, we're looking at court-ordered asset liquidations, forced house sales, and massive tax triggers. The underlying philosophy, the idea that the state has this ultimate right to step in, carve things up, and profit from the dissolution of a family unit, honestly, it's barely changed since 1066.
Which brings us to a really crucial point. In the eyes of the modern legal system, your private family home is treated as a default feudal territory. Just like that historical crown monopoly where the king owned the dirt, today, when a marriage breaks down, the state aggressively steps in and asserts its jurisdiction. The wealth you've spent decades building, it can't just stay intact. To separate two parties, the state demands the assets be carved up. Stocks get sold, real estate gets flipped, retirement accounts get sliced, and at every single step, the modern system is taking its cut.
To see exactly how this confiscation happens, we just need to look at the massive real estate capital gains tax cliff. Right now, the tax code lets a married couple filing jointly exclude up to $500,000 of profit from selling their primary home. But the second a divorce hits, that exclusion drops straight off a cliff, down to just $250,000 per person. So, if a divorcing couple owns a highly appreciated home, they are staring down the barrel of losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes if they mismanage the timing of the sale. The system is literally setting a financial trap right in the middle of a family crisis.
And believe me, the traps get way more sophisticated than that. Take Internal Revenue Code Section 1041. On paper, it sounds like a lifeline. It makes transferring property between divorcing spouses completely tax-free at the time of the transfer. But it's actually an illusion. Section 1041 is hiding a deferred tax basis trap. See, the original tax basis transfers right along with the property, so the spouse who keeps the house is entirely on the hook for a massive capital gains hit when they eventually sell it later on. The fear of triggering these hidden penalties practically forces couples to fork over huge fees to professionals just to engineer a mathematically safe way out.
Welcome to what our sources aptly call the fattening the pig pipeline. It's a pretty ruthless, multi-layered machine. Step 1, you get married, build your life, grow your assets. You fatten the pig. Step 2, the divorce trigger is pulled. Step 3, the system forces a sale or liquidation of those hard-earned assets. And Step 4, the industry harvests. The state is playing both the breeder and the butcher here. It uses taxes and legal mandates to slaughter the wealth you built over decades, completely redistributing it back into the economy and the legal ecosystem.
The sheer complexity of navigating all this perfectly illustrates how the tax code itself fattens that pig for the professional services industry. To dodge those massive tax hits and actually execute a structured buyout or an incident-to-divorce property transfer, you can't just shake hands and part ways. By design, the system forces you to hire a small army of specialized real estate attorneys, tax pros, actuaries, and forensic appraisers. By the time your assets are actually divided up, a huge chunk of your home equity and life savings has completely vanished, funneled straight into the pockets of the legal and financial sectors.
So what's the move here? How do you actually disrupt this pipeline? Well, achieving true financial sovereignty means keeping your assets locked firmly inside that purple circle of safety we talked about earlier. You have to actively block those sharp chevrons from slicing in, which means starving the state machine of its entry fees. Because if you don't build a barrier beforehand, the default legal system will automatically trigger those same historical mechanisms of asset confiscation the very second a dispute arises. Fortunately, our sources point to a few key strategies you can use to build a fortress around your wealth and bypass this closed loop entirely. Trust structures, for example, can offer a kind of natural immunity to probate courts. Then you have meticulously drafted prenuptial and postnuptial agreements, which let you set the rules of division before the state can force its default laws on you. You can even utilize binding arbitration to handle asset division totally outside the public court system, completely starving the machine of those fees. And by looking into jurisdictions that pioneer legal automation and total financial separation, couples can literally opt out of the traditional, wildly expensive legal harvest.
This leaves us with a really critical question, something to chew on when you evaluate your own property and relationships. Have you structured your assets to be naturally immune, keeping them protected inside that sovereign circle? Or are you, just by relying on the default laws of the modern state, unwittingly fattening the pig for a system that's been designed since the year 1066 to ensure the house always gets its cut?